What should you do in a recession? And what should you be focused on right now to ensure that your agency is recession proof? And why is it a bad idea to rely on referrals? And what should you be doing when you've got time blocked out in your diary to focus on business development? And why is building a brand more important than lead generation? Well, these questions and more we're going to answer in this really broad ranging discussion in today's episode of the Agency Accelerator podcast. And I'm really excited to have with me Ollie Duffy-Lee, who is the founder of the Authority Agency, the growth agency company that supports agencies' business development strategies. Now, I love it when I have guests on the podcast that have a different view to my own. And while Ollie and I agreed on many things, he definitely has a few different opinions to me on business development. So this is a really intriguing episode full of value, and let's get on with the show. I'm Rob DaCosta, and this is the Agency Accelerator podcast. As someone who has stood in your shoes, having started, grown, and sold my own agency, I know just how it feels in the ups and downs of agency life. So this podcast aims to ease your journey just a little by sharing mine and my guests' experiences and advice as you navigate your way to growing a profitable, sustainable, and enjoyable business. I'm really excited today to be joined by Ollie Duffy-Lee, and we are talking about a potential recession and whether it's going to happen, how we need to be best prepared for it, and all that good stuff. So we'll dig into more of that. But first of all, Ollie, welcome to the show. And I just wanted to get a sense from you what you feel like right now. We are recording this in August 2022. What now should agencies be focusing on?
Hey, Rob, really great to be here. So yeah, right now today, I don't think agencies need to change their focus from what they should be focused on really all the time, right? And from a very simple standpoint in terms of their marketing and the sales, it's finding new clients and keeping them and growing them, right? Yeah. And so that's just as important now as it ever is. There's one thing that I think is quite scary for agencies at the moment. So I entered the world of work, the agency world, about 2009. So just off the back of the 2008 recession, these two recessions are going to be very different, I think. I mean, that was characterized by house prices being crashing, unemployment, that sort of thing. This is characterized by rising cost of living. So we will be different. But one thing we saw was referrals and repeat organic business basically dried up. And so if I was an agency that relied on referrals for over 50% of my new business at the moment, that would be scary for me. And I think if, in answer to your question, one thing to focus on right now is creating systems to generate new business regularly from outside of your existing network.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? When I meet a client for the first time and I'm talking to them and I ask them how they get their business, and they often very proudly say, well, I get all my business from referrals and word of mouth. And I say to them, that's fantastic. And of course, you want to encourage that. But referrals and word of mouth isn't really a strategy. It's more of a kind of good luck. And of course, yeah, you nurture your network and that results in referrals and word of mouth business. But it isn't really a solid, repeatable, scalable strategy. So I think, like you say, especially if people are relying on 50% of their business coming from that, then they're in a precarious situation, regardless of what the economy is like, but especially if we're heading to a recession. Now, one thing someone might say to you in response to that is, so Ollie, yeah, I get that, but I'm so tied up in client service at the moment that I don't have much time to do business development. And that's why it's so fortunate that we get all of our business through referrals. What would your response be to that?
So many responses to that, Rob. So first thing is, it's amazing that you're doing a great job servicing clients, because another thing that's really important, there was another thing to focus on in going into recession, it's retaining clients. Because the thing that will hurt agencies will not be not being able to find new clients, because they're not doing loads of that already. It's losing their biggest clients that have been great with them for the last 5 years plus. Okay, so no bad thing to be giving your clients a really good service. But I think the harsher answer to that is we make time for what we think is important. And a lot of people I've found with our clients, they're not spending time on new business. Yes, they're very busy, but they're not spending time on new business because they don't really know what activities to do. And if there's an element of uncertainty around whether this will work as a strategy, you'll come up with any excuse you want to not commit to that strategy and not do it consistently. Unfortunately, laid on top of that, in 2022, we are obsessed with things that happen instantly. We want things to happen now. I put out a LinkedIn post, why didn't it get me 5 clients? That sort of thing. And so that cultural layer of instant results, instant gratification, coupled with, I'm not sure if this is going to work, actually creates is actually, I found, the reason people don't put their time and effort into new business, not always because they are stacked with client work. Now, that may seem harsh. Do you think that's harsh, Rob?
No, I think that's true. I think we're all like elastic bands and we ping back into our comfort zone. And,
Yeah, nice.
I was just talking to a couple of people who were being promoted to a joint MD role. And
Yep.
I gave them that word of caution yesterday. I said, you have to step into that role. And there are aspects of that that you're going to be scared about. And you might justify not stepping into it because you're really busy serving clients. But the reality is, unless you make the time, you'll never step into it. And it's exactly true with business development as well. And I think you've nailed two very important points there, which I want to sort of emphasize. One is that we live in this instant gratification world
Yeah.
where we want results instantly. And it doesn't help that we see, ads telling us, some guy standing in front of a expensive yacht that isn't even his, telling you that he can make you millions overnight, because we all know that's not true. And the really robust business development and marketing strategies always deliver in the medium to long term. So what I always tell my
Yeah.
clients is that you may not be able to see that far forward, but if you don't start today, you'll never get to that mid to long term point.
Yeah, the exponential curve is the best visual representation of how that stuff works. I have another question for you though. So like when I hear someone say that as well, it indicates a couple of things to me. Maybe pricing is a little bit too low, which is meaning they can't hire the right people to remove them out of it. Or could be culturally from their point of view, they're a bit of a perfectionist and they don't want to let go. So I haven't got time for new business argument. I see it as flawed in many, many different ways. And it's unpicking why the thought is there, not why the situation is there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Totally two things. If I'm really busy and I've got all these referrals coming in and I've got no time to breathe, then yeah, look at your pricing. That's one thing. And second of all, I think a lot of the clients I work with who are the agency owner who would probably have responsibility for new biz, they are not just perfectionists, but they're also very controlling. Why
Yeah,
do most people start their own agency? Because they want flexibility and freedom, but they also want control that they may have not had in their last agency
exactly.
when they were an employee. So that's why they start, and so they find it very difficult to relinquish control. And of course, they think they run this belief that no one will do it as well as them, as quick as them, as thorough as them, and so they don't want to let go. And they also run this belief that if I hand a client over to a member of my team, the client will be unhappy and leave me. And of course, we have to, like you say, we have to unpack this and challenge all of
Yeah.
those beliefs. So just let's go off at a bit of a tangent here, because I'm just really interested to know whether you're aligned with my thinking around, like, what are some of the smart, non-negotiable strategies that people should be putting in place if they want a consistent flow of new business?
So I'm a massive believer of brand over lead gen. I think lead generation as a concept in 2022 is flawed, and I think it's as a mindset, lead gen is really damaging to your brand. So when we ask ourselves the question, how do we get more leads? That's probably the worst question we can ask ourselves, because a few things happen. One is we start picturing potential clients as numbers on a page. But the worst bit, well, there's two other bad things. The other bad thing is that it puts us into chase mode. We really want to be in attract mode. Now, that's not that easy, especially if you're a startup, but you want to be more in attract mode, attracting the right people than chasing. So that's not a good thing. But the worst bit, Rob, is that when we go after leads and we put in this lead gen strategy and then a referral comes in, we stop because we're like, oh, well, we did it, the strategy didn't work, but we got a lead from somewhere else. So the leads come in and then we're going to service it. So it's a very up and down temporary thing. So I don't really like lead gen as a strategy. So then you've got to ask a question, how do I build a cool brand around me as a founder and around us as an agency? And non-negotiable today is, how do I build a really cool brand around me as a founder? The main reason why is because it's never been easier. So we've got wonderful, wonderful channels like LinkedIn, for example. If LinkedIn was a physical place, I would spend all my time there. I think it's a wonderful place. But also emerging channels like TikTok. I don't think you can call TikTok emerging anymore, but maybe it is for B2B. YouTube is another great channel where it's really, really easy to target your exact audience and show them through good value-based content that you know your stuff. So non-negotiable, there's loads of other things to layer on top of that, but non-negotiable is building a personal brand around you as the founder.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, and that is quite. Whilst I completely agree with that, that's not quite the message I give to my clients. I love having guests on the podcast because I learn and evolve my thinking. So let me ask you this. So I've worked hard building my personal brand. I've created some amazing content, some great videos that I'm targeting on YouTube or LinkedIn. What do I want the person at the other end to do when they've watched that video. If it's not about lead gen, so traditionally I would have said, okay, so you're promoting this brand for you. You want to have a call to action in now, and that call to action might be download my lead magnet or join my workshop or something. But
Mhm.
obviously, that's perhaps not what you're thinking. So, what would you, in your view, be the next step in
So
that
I
journey?
actually I think there's a midpoint. So there's a ton of people out there who are really chasey, and they're really in that lead gen space. They give no value and they chase.
Yeah.
There's a ton of people up here who are so giving. They give loads and loads of value and they never ask. Both of those people will end up not that profitable. So it's about taking the good elements of both and sort of molding them over each other. And I think there's a few things in your content, backing up your content. We call this thought leadership marketing. I mean, that's not a new term, but the way we take that is to take really snackable thought leadership pieces, whether it's high value lead magnets, whether it's events. We love running events, and so do our clients. And off the back of them, when people opt in for those things, is offering a meeting through really nice, neat funnels. Now, this works so well for us that we encourage people to have new lead magnets every single month. Therefore, it's new gated content every single month, and therefore it's new funnels every single month. The reason, the theory behind this is, I don't know if you've heard of Dean Jackson. Yeah, so Dean Jackson's story of 100 leads, right? So 50% will never buy. Of the 15% that do, there will be 85% of those that will buy in the future, 90 to 100 to 2 days to 2 years, and these other ones who are buying now. A lot of people, what we need to do is we need to set opportunities for those 15% to say, you know what, I'm ready for a meeting now. And that's where these sort of funnels come in. That's where a nice conversion post with a DM me if you want to hear more might come in as well. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's great. It's really good, and there's a lot of good value in that. So, I always tell my audience, serve, not sell. But I
Yeah.
also say exactly what you said, that if all you do is serve, then everybody will love you as a place to learn from, but they will never have a mindset of buying from you. And
Yeah.
if all you do is sell, then people are going to get fed up and leave pretty quickly. So I always talk about the 80-20 rule here, that in your content, 80% of the time served, but you have to have a 20% selling, and you have to work out what that is. And I also, the other thing I say a lot is, if someone says no to you today, that doesn't mean they're saying no to you forever. It just means they're not ready today. And your job is to be in their world at the point when they're in enough pain and they're ready to reach out and buy from you. So that really backs up what you said. So that's really interesting. What's your views on one of the? I'll caveat this with, so it doesn't sound too loaded a question, but I'm always going on to people about the importance of building their email list. I'm always saying it's one of your business's most valuable assets, because you own your list, you don't own your social media. What's your views on that?
Essential. I think email. So one of the two crimes that agencies make when it comes to their email list is, one is they don't build one, but the worst one is they have one, they don't email them. So I don't know what they think is going to happen. But
If we're too polite, they think I don't want to bother my contact. And I tell people you should be emailing your list at least once a week. And often people fall off their chair. I mean, I've emailed my list once a week for years. And yeah, sure, people unsubscribe, but you've got to stay in their world, and they'll forget about you if you don't. So that's what I think it is. I don't know what your view is.
I mean, anyone's from my network who's in my on my email list that's listening to this will be laughing right now, because we send about, depends which list you're on, but we send up to 5 a week on our list, and it's a big mixture of things. Another thing that I see people missing with when it comes to email marketing is too much broadcasting and not enough chat starting. So if we're broadcasting all the time with content and things like that, that's great. Case studies, that's really important. But we like to employ things that, and I learned this from a coach of mine, but what we call spur emails. So short, personal, expecting response emails. So just really short individual emails in a way to start a conversation, because that person who is now becoming a now buyer, like you said, they don't set a thing in their calendar to say, I need to go and tell Rob and Ollie that I'm now a now buyer, right? They don't say that. So the more opportunities we can give them to present themselves as a now buyer, the better. And starting a conversation like that, something like, if you're an e-com agency and you're targeting D2C brands, send an email like, hey, are you still looking to grow your D2C sales from Ollie? That's a great email to send sometimes. So sending personal emails to people, I think, is really, really good at scale. But I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I actually, and it's funny, I can just see one's pinged in now, but when people download my book,
Yeah,
like the second email they get from me is, "Hey Ollie, what kind of agency do you run,
exactly.
Rob?" And people reply, and then and if they do reply, then I'll personally reply to that email that's part of the sequence. Let's get back on track. So, because I think this is a whole other podcast episode on BizDev, and hopefully people. I'll put a link to Dean Jackson because I'm obviously aware that you and I know who he is, but other people may not. And if people fell off their chair when Ollie said he sends 5 emails a week, then get back on your chair, because if you've got genuinely good content to share with the world, why wouldn't you share it? So let's just talk a little bit about, once we're in a recession and times start getting tougher, I think a lot of agencies believe that their only choices are to overservice their clients to keep them, or to start discounting their services to keep them. What is your view about that when times are getting tough?
I think that's a bigger question. It's a really interesting point. I think there is a big mistake agencies make a lot is that they aim too low with the clients they go after. Okay. Now, I think one of the big opportunities, I think this recession is a massive opportunity for agencies, honestly. So imagine you're an agency that a sort of a big, small agency, right? So in the small spectrum, a big agency in that small spectrum. And say you charge 5,000 a month for a marketing retainer. So it's not huge, but it's not tiny. Okay? And you're used to working with mid-sized companies. Now, there are a lot of companies out there, bigger companies, some of them national, some of them international, that right now, today, are used to paying 15 grand a month to an agency for a marketing retainer. The question you need to ask yourself, if you're that agency, is, are those companies going to stop marketing? Of course they're not. Absolutely not. Are they going to question whether they want to spend 15 grand a month on marketing? Probably. Now that presents a massive opportunity. And what you're saying there when it comes to what should agencies do, should agencies sort of add more? That is a defensive tactic. And I think the agencies that defend might survive, but they might not. But the best they can do is survive. The agencies that attack actually are going to thrive, because they're going to end up with clients that they were miles out of reach before, clients that wouldn't even have looked at them because they were paying 3 times as much, and they just thought, why would I work with an agency like that? Those companies, those clients are now in your eyeline, and you are now a really viable candidate for them. So should you focus on over-servicing current clients or reducing prices? No, I think you should actually be looking at what are these new clients that used to be completely out of reach that now could be open to working with. What's your view on that though, Rob?
Yeah, it's I think it's mindset. At the moment, I mean I'm no economist and I'm no crystal ball gazer, but at the moment I'm telling my audience to be careful about talking themselves into a recession. Like the behaviors, as if we're not in a recession yet. Yes, it looks like we might be heading towards one. Like you say, it's going to be very different. So who knows what it's going to look like, how long it will last. But it's funny you said what you said. I started my agency back in '92 during the first Gulf War, and there was a recession then. And then when I sold that agency and I started the Costa Coaching, it was in 2007, at the same time as you, in the financial crisis. And I always thought to myself, if I can survive in those times, I can survive in any time. So I think we have to be careful that we don't talk ourselves into this. And I think a lot of what you're saying is around belief in your own abilities and the mindset, and you need to make sure that you, at the moment, business as usual, and of course make sure you deliver great value and you communicate really well with your clients and you're focused on business development. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it does present a fantastic opportunity, and I think either the client or the agency that starts cutting everything is the one that's going to disappear. If a company is saying, oh no, we need to slash our marketing budgets, then they're the ones who are going to have problems, because marketing should be the last thing we cut, not the first thing we cut in a recession. So I completely agree with you.
Only thing I'd add to that, Rob, sorry, just to add is I think if you're an agency and you're seen as a safe pair of hands to your client, as a pair of hands, you're vulnerable. If you're seen as a strategic partner, you're going to be safer here. So the one question I would be asking is, do my clients see me as a safe pair of hands, people that deliver, brief takers, or do they see us as a strategic partner, a brief making partner that is constantly thinking about their reality? If you're down the hands area, you will be vulnerable, and those are the clients you're risking losing. So if that's where you are now, think about how you can move yourself more towards the strategic end and become a strategic partner, because then you're better value for money.
Yeah, that's great point. And this is perhaps a big question to answer in 10 minutes, but what does an agency need to do to be seen as a strategic partner and not a safe pair of hands?
That's so easy. They've got to think for their client. So if you're and this is a a sort of agency crime that lots of people are committing, they don't realize. And the worst thing about it is you don't need to. So if you are a brief taker, I look at brief taking, brief making. If you're a brief taker, what that means is you're very reliable and you sit there and you wait for the clients to think and then for them to tell you what to do. If you're a brief maker, you can take that thinking piece off your clients. So you can look at their business, look at their industry, look at the way the world's going and say, looking at everything I know about you, I have been doing the thinking for you. And what I think is that we should do this. There's a crucial element that makes this a good strategy or a bad one. And that is the level of insight you have into the client's business and their industry. Because if your insight is weak, then your ideas will be poor and that strategic thinking will be pretty valueless. But if your insight is good, you've got a good level of insight into their client, their business, their industry, you'll probably come up with some good ideas. And that is what a strategic partner does.
Yeah, I love that. So I'm really glad you could give a succinct answer to that question. I talk about this all the time, and I talk about how we need to set ourselves up to be a strategic partner from the very first conversation we ever have with the prospect, right the way through to all of our delivery and retention strategies. So now let's fast forward and assume that we are in a recession. Do you think agencies need to do anything differently or change internal structures in a recession than they would do when we're not in a recession?
Internal structures, are you referring to team and service delivery, or are you just talking about the way they run as an agency?
Team, service delivery, yeah, but those things really. And
Yeah.
I guess, cost cutting and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think you nailed it when don't talk yourself into a recession. But if we did find ourselves there, look at the same metrics that you're already looking at. I don't think you should look at like recession metrics. Make sure your profitability is good and you're happy with it. Make sure that the revenue is stable or it's going up, and make sure your new business metrics, so the amount of appointments you're having, the amount of clients you're getting each month, are looking healthy as well. I'm massively of the opinion that we should be more aggressive in our strategy than defensive. And so I'm sort of very hesitant to talk about defensive strategies. However, Rob, I would say that may not be the most amazing recession advice if we were actually in it. So what's your view on that?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I think obvious things. I think the number one thing I would say is know your data,
Yeah,
because I don't think enough people do. So you need to be on top of cash flow. That's probably the biggest thing. You need to be hot on debtors, and you need to be hot on getting your invoices out on time and not missing the end of the month, which so many do because they're too busy doing other stuff. You need to get really good at that. You need to know your data so that you are looking at your numbers. I think you need to have a robust plan that you are really focused on delivering, and that you are nimble about changing, because every day we know something today that we didn't know yesterday, and plans fail when they get cast in stone. But yeah, I think it should be business as usual. I think the worst thing you could do is panic and start cutting everything, because then you're doing what you don't want your clients to do, which is cutting all your costs. I mean, some other things that could come into play, like getting rid of an office, which probably a lot of people have done anyway, if you do need to cut costs. But I want to come back to say, don't talk yourself into a recession. And when we're in a recession, don't talk yourself out of clients. Like, don't start projecting what you think the client is thinking and how they might behave. And then you start acting as if they've already behaved like that. And then you've created your self-fulfilling prophecy.
exactly. That's exactly right. And people will pick that up, and in your service delivery, that'll come across as well. I should caveat one thing that I think is really important, and I think a lot of agencies struggle with this. If you want to be aggressive in your strategy, it helps to have a good buffer or war chest in your bank account. And so if your profit margins are, say, a little bit lower, but you're on a scale mission right now, it might be a good idea to just increase your margins a little bit and stack a bit of money in your bank account so that if something did happen, you could still be aggressive. I think this is one of the areas where smaller agencies in particular struggle. And so that, coupled with really focusing on your cash flow, well, if you do those two things, you'll be fine, actually. But yeah,
Let me ask you two difficult, well, one easy one, perhaps not so easy question, but what would be a good war chest for a client to have? What would be a good goal for them?
ask your accountant. I don't know. I think you want to have a good runway. So if you're looking at your monthly expenses, I think you want to have at least 4 months, probably. If you can have 6, that would be great. Another way of looking at it is working with your accountant or your financial people about how much you can extract after a certain amount without having too much of a tax liability.
Yeah.
So I also don't think founders pay themselves quite enough either.
No.
So and I understand why, but yeah, make sure you're
Yeah.
getting.
I always say 3 to 6 months. If you didn't earn any money for 3 months, could you survive? So
Yeah, I think that's minimum,
that's
right? Yeah.
that's a starting point, but then go for 6 months. Let me ask you another really probably a difficult question to answer because it might be how long is a piece of string, but what is a good margin that an agency should be working towards?
I think about this question all the time. So I think it depends on what are your aims? Are you trying to scale really, really fast, or are you trying to stack cash in the bank and just have a nice life? So if you want to stack cash, you can go anywhere over 50%, maybe 60% margin. If you want to scale fast, I wouldn't even mind seeing like a 15 or 20% margin on most projects. It really depends on what you want to do, but having might be conscious about it and hit your margin, set a margin and hit it.
Yeah.
Don't is that aligned with what you think?
Yeah, I think if someone was hitting 50 or 60%, they would be absolutely delighted. I
Yeah.
would say the average margin is somewhere between 25 and 35%. But I do see some clients I work with whose margin's down as low as 5 or 10%. And I'm sort of saying you're almost running a charity here. So
Mm,
got to look at what's going on and unpick that to work out what is it your pricing, is it your servicing, is it your internal
yeah.
costs, what is the cause of that. But really interesting conversation that we could carry on talking about. We kind of meandered all over the place, but I know that this is a really action-packed episode with lots of great insights from you, Ollie, and some great reminders as well that I know the audience will find really useful. So let me ask you the question I ask all of my audience, which is if you could go back in time and give your younger self just starting out in business a piece of advice, what would it be?
Um, I know I saw Tom Hanks said this a while ago at a round table, and he was talking about this too shall pass, and he was saying I wish I could remind myself this too shall pass. So when stuff was really bad, this too shall pass, and when stuff is really really good, this too shall pass. And I think I try really hard to remember that now. And when I first started, I just thought that the lows, that was just going to be how they were for the rest of time. So that would be the advice I would give myself and any people starting out now.
Yeah, what a great piece of advice. And I must have 50 or 60 guests on, and I don't think anyone's ever said that before. So that is really
What's your
great.
What's your piece of advice?
Have a plan. Have a plan, have a goal in mind, because I think like many people I started my agency through like an opportunity. I was not going anywhere in my job. I was a marketing manager. We couldn't hire I worked in tech. We couldn't hire a good tech agency, so I thought, I know I'm going to start my own agency. I did that, ran it on my own for a year, then hired my first member of the team, and then grew it to 25 staff, and it all happened in a blink of an eye, and I had no control over it. So I don't know. No one's ever asked me that question before, but I think it would be, yeah, have a plan and enjoy it a bit more.
Yeah,
Like I live a very different life now to the one I led back then. I had a lot more money then, but I'm much happier now. And I don't think I enjoyed everything. It was,
yeah,
when you're in your early 20s, it's, I don't know. I wasn't even that materialistic, but I don't know. Anyway, I just wish I enjoyed it more. So maybe it would be, Rob, stop and smell the roses and enjoy where you're at, because you know I always think we should be born at 18, get younger, and retain all the wisdom we have, because
that's
then
true.
we would enjoy everything so
That's
much
very
more.
helpful. Yeah.
Now before I go rabbiting on about that, if people wanted to find out more about you and get in touch with you, Ollie, where would they
Oh, well,
go?
I think, like I said, I live most of my life on LinkedIn. So please just reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn. We've got a newsletter which we put out every week, all about agencies and agency growth. So yeah, reach out, say hi, and say you'd listened into this podcast, and I'd love to chat.
Great. I will put a link to that in the show notes. And just want to say a big thank you for giving up some of your time and sharing your wisdom with the audience today. I know this is going to be seen as a really valuable episode. So thanks again.
Thank you very much.